Just like I said, the Edmonton Oilers would win Game 7. Maybe not exactly the way I drew it up. We're going on to the conference final.
You are Locked On Oilers, your daily podcast on the Edmonton Oilers, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to this Tuesday edition of Locked On Oilers. I am still your host, Nick Sararis. As long as the Oilers are going, we're still going. What a game. What a moment. Whole lot to talk about. But first, today's episode is brought to you by our friends over at FanDuel. Make every moment more. Right now, new customers get $150 in bonus bets with any winning $5 bet. It's $150 with any winning $5 bet. Visit fanduel.com/lockedon to get started. So today's episode, very straightforward. A whole lot of Game 7 discourse. We're going to start with the big picture, the narratives, the conversation, the stuff that I find eminently fascinating because it's the human element within the game. We'll talk about the game itself, obviously. And then third segment, we'll touch on what it all means and we'll put it into proper context. We'll talk a little bit about Western Conference Final, but enjoy this. That's the most important thing I hope you take away from this episode of Locked On Oilers today. Enjoy this. Moments like this do not happen often. You heard me talk about it on the show the other day. The Oilers have only played 11 Game 7s in their franchise's history, and I understand they're a little bit, now it's 12, excuse me. It was 11 going into today's game. So they played 12 Game 7s in their franchise's history. I understand they're not an old franchise. They're not original six, but 12 times in a 50-something year franchise history, it doesn't happen all that often. The last time they went, they beat the Kings. That was something to feel good about. Tonight, you made it to the Final Four. For the second time in a 3-year window, you made it to the Final Four. That in of itself is an accomplishment. And this is kind of stepping on some of the stuff I wanted to talk about in the third segment of today's show about what it all means and the Western Conference Final. But I think as fans, we all are guilty of occasionally being a bit unrealistic. And the Oilers themselves have said it's Stanley Cup or bust for this group. And I understand that as an internal expectation. But as a fan, my biggest takeaway as I've gotten older, I'm only 27, but the biggest takeaway I have from sports, no matter what it is, whether it's Champions League soccer, the National Hockey League, Formula One, NASCAR, tennis, golf, WWE, it is about the journey to get somewhere. That is what compels me now as a sports fan and at my age. I find how people come to the points they're at in their lives, their professional careers, eminently more interesting than some of the mechanics within the game. Don't get me wrong. I love talking X's and O's. I love talking tactics, but that's not going to make a new fan. What's going to make a new fan? You sitting down someone and telling them, this might be the greatest hockey player to ever live. And he's 4 wins away from playing for the Stanley Cup for the first time. Okay, you have my attention. That's the type of perspective that we can lose sometimes. And I understand that the Oilers are coming out of a long, rough patch. You know, for much of the last decade, pretty uncompetitive. They made the Stanley Cup final the first year out of the lockout, picked first overall quite a few times, had one playoff series win to show for it in 2017, and then they lost to the Ducks in the second round of the playoffs that year. And then it took them a while to get back. You know, they lost in the bubble. Then in 2021, they lose to the Jets. Very, very unfortunate. Then 2 years ago, they get to the conference final. Colorado, just a better team, smokes them, blows their doors off. Last year, they run into Vegas, and it happens, you know. Every now and then you are going to run into a team that's better than you. And that's why I do want to emphasize, take this moment in. There is an old Bill Belichick quote. I assume you're familiar with Bill Belichick, the former coach of the New England Patriots, the coach all the Tom Brady years. he told Kevin Clark, who was writing for The Athletic, I think at the time, or maybe it was The Ringer. It doesn't matter for what publication, but Belichick said there are 32 teams in this league. He was talking about the NFL, but now that there are the same number of teams in the NHL, I can use this quote. There are 32 teams in this league. Before we start the season, there are 10 teams that have no chance of winning the Stanley Cup, in the NFL's case, winning the Lombardi, winning the championship. Before we even start, before we play any games, there are 10 teams that are just not talented enough to be competitive. Even in their most wildest dreams, you couldn't fathom them going on a run. Very similar to the NHL when you get to that bottom 5 to 10 teams when we're talking about Chicago and San Jose and Anaheim and Columbus, some really genuinely stinky teams out there. And then we get to that middle class. And the next part of that is, of the remaining 22 teams, there are about 10 that think they can win the Stanley Cup. That brings us down to 12. Of those 10 teams, none of them can actually win the Stanley Cup. This leaves us with a final 12. Of those 12, about 6 have a real chance of winning the championship in a given year. That's always been the way I've done my mental math. That has always been the way I try and put teams into perspective. For example, I'll give you a good example. Coming into the playoffs in the Eastern Conference, Carolina was the betting favorite to come out of the Eastern Conference. I personally did not think Carolina was one of those 6 teams. I thought Carolina would need something to break their way if they were going to make it happen, because they didn't have the high-end talent. And the high-end talent was the difference tonight. And the Canucks have a valid excuse. Thatcher Demko very well going to finish second in Vezina voting, and Brock Besser had 40 goals this year. Neither of those guys in the lineup, you have a valid excuse. But Leon Draisaitl, Evan Bouchard, those guys showed up tonight. Those guys validated a lot of what we've talked about on the show over the last few weeks, that when the chips are down and you are in these extremely high leverage situations and it's best player on best player, in this case it's Draisaitl against JT Miller, you need Draisaitl to win his minutes. And I know they got outchanced during his time at 5-on-5, but the stat I'll give you, and Dmitry Filipovich tweeted this out, so I want to give him credit. The Oilers have scored 32 goals these playoffs when Leon Draisaitl is on the ice. That's all situations. That includes power play. The Oilers are winning the minutes Draisaitl is on the ice, and Bouchard continues to amaze. He's got 20 points in 12 games, and we're talking about a defenseman. I know when I started doing the show in the trailer, I said I think Evan Bouchard's a top 10 defenseman, and I feel nothing but vindicated about how strong of a performance he was able to give. Bouchard is I talked about it on Locked On NHL with Gil on the episode for Monday about what's made him so successful. He's got the best positioning of any defenseman on the Oilers, and he's got a wicked shot. And the Oilers, as we're going to talk about in the next segment, they did their homework. They noticed some things they were going to be able to take advantage of. They found some opportunities for more offense. And for the first time, they beat the Canucks 2 games in a row at any point this season. Remember, they were 0-4 in the regular season, and then they alternated wins back and forth. The Oilers are officially... they're still under 500. Math is hard. You just saw the gears turning in my head in real time. They finished the regular season with 4 wins against the Canucks. They lost 4 in the regular season and 3 in this. So 4-7 on the season against the Canucks, but they got the most important 4 wins against those Canucks. Coming up next, we are going to dive into the game itself. We'll talk a little bit about some of the key tactical changes, some of the things that worked, some things that lucked out for the Oilers. Coming up next on Locked On Oilers, where we've got your team covered every day. We're down to conference championship time in the NBA and the NHL. Minnesota Timberwolves, Dallas Mavericks in the NBA, the Indiana Pacers and the Boston Celtics. Get out of here with the Pacers. Over here in the National, Oilers Canucks, Rangers Panthers. This is what it's all about as a sports fan. The Final Four in each league, quality teams, elite talent. And if you want to get in on the action, It's winner take all time at FanDuel, and you can bring home a big win of your own. Right now, new customers get $150 in bonus bets with any winning $5 bet. That's $150 to bet on spreads, money lines, player props, and more. Visit FanDuel.com/lockedon. Make every playoff shot count. FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. I want to thank everybody who's made Locked On Oilers their first listen of the day, whether it's on their way to work, on their way to school, at the gym, whatever. I know after a win like that, I want to consume as much content about that individual game as I possibly can if it includes my favorite team, because it just reminds me to feel good about my team. And sports, those moments are so far and few in between as a fan where you genuinely just get to be happy and bask in it. And I think the thing for me, why I've emotionally connected with the Oilers a little bit more than maybe I thought I would doing the show, is I genuinely feel for some of the guys on this team. I obviously am very empathetic for the plight of Connor McDavid. As much as I talk about Stuart Skinner needing to play better, there wasn't anyone happier than me that they hung on and won. Seeing the reaction Pickard gave him when he came off the bench in the handshake line, where he gave him the biggest hug imaginable, pressed his head against Skinner's, and just took it all in. That's what it means to these guys this time of year. I talked about that after the start Pickard won the other day, where everybody made a point in the handshake line to give him his flowers, to give him that moment of recognition. And soaking up moments like this for what they are, because they're so far and few between. And yes, the Oilers are only halfway there. 8 wins is not a Stanley Cup. They are still 4 wins away, and they're going to play, in my opinion, the best team in the entire league in Dallas in the next round. We'll cross that bridge when we get to it. For right now, the game unfolded as favorably for the Oilers as it possibly could in that first 20 minutes. The Oilers got out to a great start. They get their first goal early, they settle into the game, and the Oilers, when they play with a lead, their style of play is extremely conducive to success when they have an early lead. You know, you get those first few goals, and yes, the goals didn't come until the second period. But the first period, the Oilers dominated possession, 20-10 in scoring chances, 0.7 to 0.4 in expected goals. That puck control gave them tempo. And got to give credit where it's due. Shelovs was outstanding tonight. He made quite a few miraculous saves. You could probably say the Oilers probably should have scored 4 or 5 goals tonight based on the saves he made, outright robbed 2 goals. It's really a testament to the Oilers' stick-to-itness that even though Shelovs was robbing them, that even though they couldn't find the net, they kept plugging away, and eventually they break through. And who is it? Who is it but Cody Ceci himself to break the scoring? You know, I forget who pointed it out. I think it was Thomas Drance, the Vancouver Canucks writer for The Athletic. The last time the Oilers played in a Game 7, Cody Ceci scored the first goal in that game, and they went on to win that game against the Kings as well. Shelovs was really good tonight. The Oilers, that much better. And look, that last 10 minutes is every hockey fan's worst nightmare. Your team gets a little too comfortable with a big lead. They make a silly mistake, and they invite the other team back into the game. 3-0, that's a steep hill. 3-1, doable. 3-2, after being down 3-0, 4 minutes to go, 5 minutes to go, down 1. You're telling me we only got to score 1 more and we got a chance to win this thing? You don't want to have to be in that hold on to your butt scenario. In an ideal world, you would like the Oilers to get some zone time to cycle the puck. 17-3 in scoring chances, not great. You don't want to live in a world where you're getting that heavily outchanced at 5-on-5, because it is difficult to live that way. And The Oilers were able to survive. They were able to hang on, and it's not ideal. I have written down in my notes, hold on to your butts. I think it was very funny that down here on the American broadcast, after the TV timeout at about the 10-minute mark, for about 4 straight minutes, John Buccigross, who was doing the play-by-play for ESPN, was talking about how McDavid's clock is ticking, that if he wants to be considered one of the greats of all time, he's got to win the Stanley Cup. He was talking about all the accolades, all the individual accomplishments he has as a player, as if the game was a foregone conclusion. And Connor Garland scores with about 8.5 minutes to go, and it's 3-1. I think Buccigross was talking about the individual awards McDavid had won, and Ray Ferraro had said something about, yeah, all of the awards are great, but he just wants to win. And at 3-1, I definitely gulped. I looked over at the TV. I looked down at my notes. I looked up at the clock and said, this is going to be a long 8 minutes. And when you are in that situation as a team like the Oilers that has a chance to put the game away, and the Oilers had chances, like I said before, Shelov's really was outstanding in this game, was not the reason the Canucks lost. He didn't really have a chance on any of the goals that beat him. The Nuge one, maybe you could say he should get over, but that's a tough save. And then the other two, there's traffic in front or deflections. That was one of the things I wrote down in my notes, that the Oilers did a really good job of making Shelov's life more difficult. That's one of the real barriers between an established goalie and somebody who's a little bit more of a novice. The veteran goalies are a little bit better at tracking the puck through traffic, following the redirects, and the Bouchard shot that gets redirected by Hyman, nothing Shelov's going to be able to do about that. That's a wicked redirect. It's a crazy redirect, and it's the type of goal you need this time of year. We always, I know I am guilty as a stats person of getting caught up in well, you need to get the puck down low, you need to cycle high to low, you need redirects, you need deflections, you need to get the puck between the circles, you need to get the goalie moving left to right. The best play this time of year is a screenshot. At worst, it gets blocked and you have an opportunity to recover possession. At best, the goalie doesn't see the puck, it beats him clean. You also have the opportunity of the puck getting deflected or the puck going off into a corner because it's redirected out of position, and you still have an opportunity to sustain possession. The Oilers did a really nice job in this game making Shelov's be the difference, and he was. And I know that's kind of crazy to say about a game that was 3-0, but the Oilers played really well. This is undoubtedly I'll quote Connor McDavid, what he said after the game. We were great for the first 52 minutes, and then the Garland goal. That's arguably the best the Oilers have played all postseason, how they played that first 50-some-odd minutes. Lots of possession, Canucks, lots of empty possession. I got a lot of heat from Canucks fans in the comments on YouTube saying, oh, you're saying the Oilers didn't play that badly and the Canucks barely played well. The Oilers went 0 for 5 on the power play. The final score of the game was 3-2, and the Canucks scored with a few minutes to go in the third period. The Oilers score once on one of those power plays. That game very well could have had a different outcome, and maybe there isn't even a game 7. So possession is helpful, but it is not guarantee success. And that's one of the real, I think that is one of the real statistical breakthroughs that even the most amateur statistical analysis people can figure out, that just because you have the puck doesn't necessarily mean you're doing things with it. The Hurricanes have made a fine art of having 70 scoring chances a game and only scoring 2 goals because they're not getting the puck to dangerous areas. The Canucks did a really good job in this series of frustrating the Oilers on offense, but they adapted very well, the Oilers. They found a way to beat a goalie who was giving them a hard time. That's where you got to give credit to the coaching staff for pointing out, okay, we can't beat this guy clean. We're going to need to muck things up. We're going to need to make his life difficult. And the Oilers did a great job of that tonight. And it's why they won this game. I will also mention something I said in yesterday's episode. The Oilers needed a power play goal in this game after going 0 for 5, I believe. It was 0 for 2 in game 5 and then 0 for 3 in game 6, if I remember correctly. They hadn't scored on the power play in 2 straight games, which for this Oilers power play that's been so outstanding all regular season and in these playoffs, kind of out of character. So you were very happy to see them get that. Very happy to see that it was Nuge, somebody who I can admit I've been a little bit hard on in these playoffs, but you get secondary scoring, suddenly weird things start happening. But coming up next, we're going to talk about what it all means, keeping things in perspective, coming up next on Locked On Oilers. Hello, everyone, and thank you so much for listening to today's episode. Like I've been reiterating, and I'll say again here, soak it in. Really take a minute to appreciate how hard it is to get here. Hockey season starts second week of September when training camp testing opens, where the guys come in before actual training camp and the preseason games to start doing their athletic testing to see if they've met their benchmarks for the summer. Half of September, October, November, December, January, February, March, April. We are in the third week of May. The Stanley Cup will not be awarded until the third week of June, the second week of June. We still got a month to go. We're talking 9 months to get to this point. 9 months. That's the amount of time it takes a child to develop in the womb. That is a long time. That is a lot of investment and energy and emotions and physical toll to put into your body in pursuit of a singular goal. That's the thing that's always struck me so beautifully about sports, is that you have to be able to put it all aside, to cooperate with teammates, to get to that shared common goal. The Oilers are going to face an uphill battle in the conference final, but again, we will cross that bridge when the time comes. For now, you have to appreciate the moment. And I know there are a lot of Oilers fans. There are guys on that team, the coaching staff, the front office, that will say, our goal was not to make the conference final. They are professionals. You are a fan. You are allowed to have your feelings mean something to you. You don't want the feelings to mean something to the players, to the general manager, the coaches, because you want them making rational decisions in the best interest of the team. You as a fan can be as excited, as nervous about the next round. You can handle this however you want. The most productive mindset I have had, it's hard to get here. We start with 32. We're down to 4. I am not prepared to say that every team that doesn't win the Stanley Cup had a failed season. I think if you're a team like Carolina that put a lot of assets in the middle and then bombed out in the second round again, I think you might be able to say Carolina's season was a failure. The Leafs, I think you could say their season was a failure. I think you could say the Devils, the Penguins, those teams that had playoff expectations but missed the playoffs. I think that's reasonable. I think you could say the Flames had a failure of a season. I think you could say the Kraken had a failure of a season. I think you could say the Coyotes had a failure of a season. If you make it to this point of the year, you can say you're disappointed, but it is not a failure. To be one of the final 4 teams for a second time in a 3-year window, that's an accomplishment. Now, as the wise philosopher Kobe Bean Bryant once said, job's not finished, and the Oilers are aware of that. They're going to take a day here. They're going to try and get Adam Henrique healthy. They're going to try and get Corey Perry healthy. When they're healthy, great. If they're not able to go, Sam Carrick, more than passable tonight. The Oilers' bottom 6 was really good in terms of the scoring chances and the expected goals. They just kept the puck in the Vancouver end of the ice a lot of the game, kept the pressure off their defense, and minimized the amount of defense they had to play. I want to point this out. The Oilers are in the conference final with sub 880 goaltending. That alone is a testament to the strength and the depth of this team. I know a lot of people are going to say, well, if Ken Holland just got a better goalie, we wouldn't have this issue. Yes, you're 100% right. But Oilers teams of years past would not have had the depth at forward and on defense to be able to overcome such fatalistically bad goaltending. That is a sign of growth. And no, the Oilers are not as deep as the Stars. They're not as deep as the Panthers. They're not as deep as the Rangers. They're going to have a puncher's chance against Dallas, and they would have a puncher's chance in the Cup final. This is the best Oilers team of McDavid and Draisaitl's tenure in Edmonton. There are a lot of uncertainties on the horizon, whether or not Leon's going to agree to that extension or ride it out till the end of next summer, what Connor's going to do 2 years from now, all of that. Like we talk about, the vultures, they're circling. They don't want to do real sports media. They don't want to write actually interesting things. They want to try and pick the bones. They want to trade Leon Draisaitl to the Bruins. They want to trade Leon Draisaitl to the Hurricanes. They want to trade Leon Draisaitl to the Blackhawks. They want anything other than having to actually write about hockey because they don't know a whole lot about hockey. That's the dirty secret of all of the people who are consistently writing the trade bait and the free agency stuff. They don't actually know a lot. If they did, they would want to talk about the games as opposed to, oh, well, if the Oilers lose, they got to make some changes. They got to trade Leon. They got to maybe Connor's going to want out. How do you know what Connor McDavid wants? How do you know what Leon Draisaitl wants? Why would either of those guys want to leave? They're kings in Edmonton. Or whoever the GM is, whether it's Ken Holland or if God bless him, he takes the Blue Jackets job. Good. If you don't want to be here, to quote the great Mike Tomlin, we don't want any hostages. If you want to be here, that's great. We want you to be here. If you don't want to be here, don't let the door hit you on the way out. Columbus is beautiful. I hope you enjoy winning 34 games a year. I really do, Ken Holland. But soak it in. Take in moments like this. They don't come often. So much of sports is about failure. It is about failure in practice. It is about failure in games. It is about seasons that do not end in championships. And I largely believe that is where championships are ultimately won. They are won in those moments of failure where you learn and you grow, where you calcify a scar. That is where you learn who you are as a person, which ultimately makes you a better player. We know it is almost common conjecture at this point that eventually, if you are going to win a Stanley Cup, you're going to have to lose in the playoffs a couple times. You look at all of recent NHL history, other than Vegas, and even Vegas, they made the playoffs consistently for a half decade before they ultimately won the cup. So we can put them in there. They went to a cup final, a couple conference finals before they finally won. Colorado, same boat. Tampa Bay, same boat. St. Louis, not exactly the same boat, but consistent playoff team. Washington, consistent playoff team. Pittsburgh, consistent playoff team. Chicago, consistent playoff team. LA, yeah. I lost track of my years there. I try and block out 2014 as a Ranger fan. Kings, consistent playoff team. Blackhawks, consistent playoff team. 2012. Wait, no. 2013 Blackhawks, consistent playoff team. 2012 Kings, consistent playoff team. 2011 Bruins, consistent playoff team. 2010 Blackhawks, consistent playoff team. Penguins, Red Wings. You get my point. If you want to win the Stanley Cup, you need to make the playoffs a lot because you need as many cracks at it as you can, because it is really difficult to go far in the Stanley Cup playoffs because of the variance, especially because of the way overtime works, where it's sudden death. It's the only sport where the overtime is like this. Yes, there's golden goal in FIFA, but golden goal is not the same. It's not the same feel. All right, Oilers fans, thank you so much for listening to today's show. Make sure you are subscribed wherever you get your podcasts or over on YouTube. Leave the show a 5-star review on Apple Podcasts or Spotify. Over on YouTube, hit the alarm bell, get a notification whenever new content goes live. Leave me a comment. What are you most happy about with this team winning tonight? I will talk to you guys tomorrow. Until then, let's go Oilers.